Good evening and welcome to episode 12 of Will You Review My CV? I'm your host, Alan Wozni, and today, I want to highlight two career advice submissions I made in July 2019 that were in response to one was a job search query made through LinkedIn influencer Oleg Vishnopolsky, and the second was a career advice submission that was made on the LinkedIn career advice portal. And the first individual was a long-term human resources career professional in the city of Surrey, near Vancouver, British Columbia. And the second individual is a fraud prevention specialist at the CIBC Bank in Montreal here in Canada. Now, before I go into the details of the two submissions I made back in July 2019, I want to highlight a common response I have included in many of the career advice submissions I have made throughout 2008 that I made throughout 2018 and 2019. This centers around the resistance that many IT departments of larger, probably more established companies, their resistance towards adopting new technologies, particularly SaaS or software as a service. Now, depending on the culture and environment of smaller companies, this resistance could also be quite prevalent. Now, that kind of existed 2 years ago. I came back to Canada in July 2019, and I saw that, and I highlight that in one of my earlier episodes on this channel. You know, that may different. The resistance may differ today, but the common, I still believe, there's some common excuses for not adopting new SaaS. But in late 2017, while I was CFO of Qatar Solar, I took a deep dive into emerging technologies, and it started with blockchain. And of course, it didn't take long for me to see the trends in where SaaS were being applied in virtually all aspects of business. You know, all functional areas, including marketing, legal, finance, accounting, HR, data science, data management. The industry sectors. I mean, I don't think there's any that haven't been affected by SaaS or new tech. But SaaS, particularly software as a service, which is really bolt on, adding onto existing ERP systems, industry sectors, including fintech, real estate, education, healthcare, agriculture, biosciences, cybersecurity. I mean, I don't think any sector's not been touched by SaaS, some kind of SaaS or another. And then just deep tech, including AI or artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, Internet of Things, which has been around for a while now, sensors and so forth, but integrating all those together, robotics, drones, autonomous vehicles, ride sharing. I mean, it's incredible. SaaS products they really have moved from the IT department to the operations teams tasked with managing the business. In fact, in a May 2019 podcast, Andreessen Horowitz podcast, it was titled, "What Time Is It?" And David Ulevich, he's a partner with Andreessen Horowitz, and Sonal Chokshi, she's the editor in chief at Andreessen Horowitz, and they provide a great insight onto how non-IT people in business are using SaaS on a large scale. So, although the COVID-19 pandemic did highlight the importance of technology to support and enable the work from home and this podcast, this YouTube channel, the work from home phenomena, it really took off through the pandemic. But the SaaS continued to face resistance from many companies. I still see it. I experienced this during my final days of Qatar Solar, and while I was conducting my own job search. And I don't want to belabor this point, but learning the SaaS is easy, but applying and adopting it, finding excuses of not to do it are IT departments. They deem such SaaS as to be lacking compatibility with their existing systems. I mean, that's been around forever, but I think it's more prevalent with SaaS. Management. They feel the existing ERP systems are sufficient, and they don't want to pay. They don't want to pay for anything for a costly conversion. SaaS cannot secure confidential data. That's another good excuse. These excuses may or may not be relevant, and I think SaaS today, the software today, can overcome these have overcome these over the last 10 years, not just the last couple of years. And the last one is there's just a lack of incentive to introduce new SaaS due to the deemed threat of the jobs. And on my earlier part, New Era Insurance, that example is still the manual, the incumbent insurance company. I can't remember the episode number where I talked about the New Era Insurance, but that was 2 years ago. I still know there's a lot of the existing systems really are the reasons why keep preventing people from implementing some very basic SaaS software. Anyway, the circumstances and reasons for rejecting the SaaS will vary from company to company. I want to now turn to the PowerPoint presentation I prepared outlining the responses I made to the two job search appeals. One was a job search appeal by one individual, and the other was a career advice submission made by the other individual. So on July 25th, 2019, Caroline Laycock, a long-term human resources and team lead professional with the City of Surrey, just outside of Vancouver. And then on the next day, 26th of July, 2019, Rey Dufresne, a fraud prevention specialist at the CIBC Bank in Montreal, here in Quebec or in Canada, he submitted it through the career advice portal. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through some of this now. Actually, all of it. Okay. So those are the two, and I'll just highlight. I just mentioned that. So today's date's July 3rd, 2021. So this is the submission made through, or that Caroline had made, submitted to via the page of LinkedIn influencer Oleg Vishnopolsky. Having applied for many jobs and no response, I do and am disappointed. I try to show my skills, but nothing. Any strategies on how to get noticed? All right. I wanted to see, I took a good look at Caroline's her LinkedIn profile back then, and then recently. She's done an amazing job. Caroline, kudos to you, whatever term you want to use. You've gone out and learned. I don't know if maybe you're not getting noticed like you wanted to, but you've gone out and gotten, you got your master's degree in leadership in 2018. That was probably before you probably got that, and a year later you made that post on Oleg Vishnopolsky's page. I mean, you had a business degree in HR back in 2008. You've got you went and got a certificate for health and safety in the workplace. And and if you go to your profile, if you go to Caroline's profile, she worked 24 years at the City of Surrey and led a team up to 60 to 90 people. I don't know the details, and I spent a lot of time on that, but that's what she wrote on her. That's what she's written on her profile. So she's got an awareness, and then she's realized, well, I'm around people, I'm health and safety. Then she went and got her master's degree, and now, subsequent to my career advice submission, she went and got a diploma on curriculum and instruction. The details in that, I think you'll see on her job where she's working today. She's a curriculum developer for the Build a Biz Kids, and that's just this year. She just started that this year, and as her work experience, 24 years with the team with the City of Surrey. So that's a synopsis today, what her profile looks like. But again, I have to say, wonderful job, Caroline, for going out and just pivoting, retooling yourself. So congratulations. So I'm going back now. So 2019, what response did I put together? Remember, she wanted to get noticed. So for me, the epitome of anyone getting noticed is Gary Vaynerchuk. Get out and make content. Make people aware of your talent. She's got 24 years of history. And I put this out there because, the first time I listened to Gary Vaynerchuk, or one of the first times, is he said, "Are you 49-year-old Mary, the accountant, or 72-year-old Stan, the electrician?" Well, I was 50, then I was 52, 53, 52-year-old Alan, the accountant. That resonated with me. And I think that's applicable. And she's a senior. Caroline is a senior. She's experienced. She's been a ton of time. Thank you. The City of Surrey should be happy and thankful for her. Should be grateful for the 24 years she put in service. So I go to that expo. The Web 2.0. He makes reference to ALF it up, Smurf it up. Like those are old references, but they're still applicable. What he talked about in 2008 is, if you want to get awareness of your business, use all the platforms. This is 2008, 13 years ago. I just listened to it today because I wanted to just see what I got out of that one. It was only a 15-minute clip. I've attached that to the notes of this chapter. And I gave her some ideas on how to create awareness write articles on the city of Surrey, just what to do. Grouse Mountain, what animals are on that mountain. I don't know. You go to Vancouver and it's just, there's a sea behind you and there's Grouse Mountain up above. Real estate, just, there's shows that Lock It or Lose It, no, Lock It or Lose It. There's a show in Vancouver, the Property Brothers, I think they do out of Vancouver. They do the show out of Vancouver. There's the other one, Listed or Love It or Listed. People love real estate. She's in that city. Just write a blog on what's going on in Vancouver. And then I gave her some examples of the innovation in Vancouver. This is a small list. That list has grown. A company like Clio I think they hit the 4 billion mark recently, the legal software. But at that time, CMD, Damon Motorcycles, Inventus, PDF Tron Systems, Procurify, Transaction Guest. That was the innovation that I was aware of 2 years ago. That list is probably triple now. And the other thing is Angel List. Continue. You want to get an idea of some startups. Her 24 years as HR and team lead and a master's in leadership. Go to some startups and give them, take your 24 years and transfer to some startups that are on Angel List. Back then, the list had 1,270 roles posted. Now, I don't know if that's companies, but 1,270 open roles across Canada. Toronto had 656. Montreal had 235. And Vancouver had 208. I looked today. Canada is now up to 1,500 open roles across Canada from startups, and Vancouver has 261. This is now a year and a half from COVID, and 2 years since I sent that out. And that number's up. That just tells me that the innovation is continuing across Canada, but particularly in Vancouver. This is when so now looking at what, her base degree was HR. When you look at her LinkedIn profile, it's not quite clear that she was leading as HR, but she does talk about leading 60 to 90 people. And I think in lifeguarding and other water safety. So I focused on HR samples, HR SaaS samples. So back to my beginning, talked about adopting different SaaS. For a long time, I've just kept themes, and one is HR, and that HR theme, it's an incredible amount of innovation in that space. So I've classified into 4 different groups. These are just arbitrary, based on trying to make sense of it, because I've had a lot of people over the past 3 years or so that were HR specialists, and I just see so much funny announcements from the tech newsletters, and so recruiting, professional development, support, and performance management is kind of the broad categories. These may or may not, jive with what people know out there, the exact actual software offerings. So in the support category, Gusto, Clever Connect, Lumaps, Personio, Quinix, and Schedulo. So Quinix is actually cool. I remember this Quinix. Companies like McDonald's, Burger King, or whatever were using that. I think it's for scheduling and helping them with their staffing. Schedulo, which is the last one there, that's exactly what they do, is helping with staff scheduling for a particular remote workforce. And some of the HR stuff, this was back in 2019. I could probably populate this with 2 to 3 more times if I went through over the last 2 years. It literally, HR is one of those low-hanging fruits. Everybody seems to innovate. Here in Calgary, there's 2 or 3, 4, 5 startups. I had one on my podcast, Avanti Software. Recruiting, Alio, Good Time, Seek Out, TalkPush. I love the names. Good Time, TalkPush, Workable. Workable. You might see them, people job searching. Workable. I applied to an ATB Financial here in Calgary. There was a role for an entrepreneur strategist. And the Workable thing gave me, it was actually kind of fun. It was kind of like this Zoom experience, and you get to create, you had to answer the questions for a 2-minute video. So there was 4 or 5 questions, and then I submitted the video. You could resubmit it. It was actually pretty cool. So Workable's working in place. Prof Dev, or professional development. interplay. That's just learning, training for people. That space is very busy space. A lot of opportunities in that, or a lot of software in that space. But interplay learnings, a cloud guru, open sesame, talent soft, and go one. Those are just, there are probably way more. These are not a complete. This is just a snapshot from 2 years ago. It certainly was not meant to be a complete list. And then the last is performance, just performance management, dealing with your people. 15.5, bonusly, amplify, GoCo, Peakon, Perkbox. These are for benefits and other kind of things. And then Better Up. So those are snapshot. I'm going to leave in the episode notes some how to find some of these companies in the episode notes. And the last thing, I left off with Caroline. It was a little heavier because she's experienced. Like, I didn't even go into the venture capital companies because she just wanted to create attention. But I was like, you can create attention by learning these SaaS. Don't, it will not get you a job but learning them will just only improve, as I've said here, over the next 18 months, 3 years, or 10 years. Okay, she's older. I'm older. 10 years from now, I'm still going to be doing this stuff. So learn it today. What's relevant to you? There's going to be resistance. Don't worry about it. Learn it for you. Don't worry about your employer, who's ever saying you should or should not adopt or learn SaaS. And I'm just saying, you don't need an IT degree. You don't need to go to university, uh, to learn some of the SaaS. You get the demo, download it, get the company newsletter, follow them on social media, and from there you just learn. The workable one I just aware of, and now I've used it in practice. I don't work with it, but I've used it as the recipient. So these things are real. All right, Caroline, if I had the chance to do a redo or make an addendum today, what would I do for Caroline? Because she wanted to or wants to draw attention to her. How do I create awareness or draw attention to me? Clubhouse is a great one. People say Clubhouse isn't for me. It's really clumsy. Find out, I tell people, download, just follow, see what people are creating chat rooms about. She creates a chat room for just 24 years of history. Create a chat room. Where are they now? Where are those colleagues of mine? Where are my staff? Because it was aquatic staff. Where are those 50, 60, 70 people I used to work with? Where are they now? Where are the kids? Just get them on, invite them onto a chat room. If not Clubhouse, perhaps a podcast or Facebook live sessions. People do it all the time. It, their networks are their networks. They're not your networks. They're not my networks. They're their individual networks. So, if you start something, you never know where that's going to go. Now, looking at her current roles, and she's working with children learning, make some partnerships with ed tech programs that focus on children learning so that you bolt on and add more value to your company. Now, I have Launchpad Learning was here in Calgary. They were on my podcast. Jupe School on my podcast. They're taking 5-year-olds and teaching them how to do lighting at the Jubilee Auditorium here in Calgary, which is pretty cool. Inkley, they're in Victoria, and Inkley's helping, started with the Rethink out of grade 9 students, helping people, they kind of learning for life, pairing them up, mentoring for life, not just a one-off, but in a lifetime. That's what Inkley's on. And then Education Matters. I had Marilyn Field in my podcast before pre-COVID. I was pre-COVID, and they're whatever else education, Calgary Board of Education can't do. They try to do that, getting laptops to kids, helping them with field trips, getting them whatever it is. So that could be a bolt-on to what she's doing in Vancouver. And then look at the BC Tech startup community. BC Tech is it's a very robust. A lot of startups. Maybe there's startups that can partner with to help them scale. The program she's working with is Lit First Aid and Lifeguard Training Program. It's been around for a while. I didn't look at it in detail, but from my podcast, a lot of the nonprofits here in Calgary, a lot of nonprofits lack the resources, the funding to add in tech, to tech enable, just putting a low code, no code solution to capture some of those onto a mobile app. And just make them more tech enabled than other than just having a website. So that was kind of the thinking there. If she's could link up with some of the tech startups in BC community. Let's switch gears. So very next day, episode career advice number 231. Rey Dufresne out of Montreal. He works for CIBC Bank as a fraud specialist. He submitted a query on 26th of July, 2019 through the LinkedIn Career Advice portal. And you can see it. I'm going to read it though. Though I am well settled in my job, I've been toying around with the idea of a startup. I have a couple of great ideas. How should I proceed? What are the kinds of mistakes I should avoid? You probably guess where I'm going to go with this. I'll get into that in a second. Gary Vaynerchuk, I was going to say. So, yeah, looking at Ray, looking at his profile on LinkedIn, and he works for CIBC Fraud Prevention. He's a little 10 years younger than me. Probably he graduated from college. There's not a lot of information on his LinkedIn profile. Back in '99, I graduated '89, so 10 years. I'm 10 years older than him. He's worked the last two that are on his LinkedIn profile for CIBC since 2017, and then Rogers escalation manager. So probably bringing cases and together, and that led to his fraud prevention role at CIBC. So as I said, I started with Gary Vaynerchuk. Here's a summary of what I provided Ray. There's not a lot. I mean, it wasn't much because he just wanted. It was more on the focus. This is more of a focus on startups. So my Gary Vaynerchuk, I went pretty meta on entrepreneur-like recommendations. So podcast on entrepreneurship. I think I sent him the link to a couple of podcasts that Gary had done. There was a session he did with Tim Ferriss. Anybody who listens to this podcast will probably know who Tim Ferriss is. He's a well-known entrepreneur in the startup space in the US. And then Sean O'Shea, Good Dog. I mean, that's it's from his Crushing It book. It's from Gary Vaynerchuk's, which features, it's 8 hours of content, which features many entrepreneurs who just the grind of hustling in a startup. Sean O'Shea is one of those, the Good Dog, not the Dog Whisperer, but the Good Dog, where he just inherited 2 dogs, and he had to learn how to train them. And from that, he's written books, he's done video series. He gets people from all over the world reaching out to him. I mean, this is how many years ago? 3-4 years ago now, when I read the book, the audio book. So he's probably beyond that now. But and then back to the Web 2.0, keynote speech. Same thing. I mean, it's applicable to entrepreneurs, startups. The internet allows you to do things your grandparents couldn't do. He talks about that in the podcast, in the Web 2.0 keynote. And the Masters of Scale podcast. This one, I don't know when I listened to it, but I think it was August 2018, just on the beach somewhere, and is the 10 Commandments of Startup Success. And there's a few that resonate with. There's the bevel razor. Now he sold, I think, to Procter & Gamble for like $1 billion or something like that. But he was on there and he talked about startups and and getting no's. And then of course waiting for perfection as a startup. There was somebody called Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, and he talked about on that the 10 Commandments of Startup Success. He talked about waiting for perfection. If he had waited, Facebook probably wouldn't have gotten to where it was today, because he took the early version of Facebook and shared it with his arts history class at Harvard, and instead of working on the studying, he gave that to the students, and he used it himself to use the early Facebook. And then it turned out that everybody in that class had the highest marks they ever had, or collectively had the highest mark that class ever had. And he got an A. I think he got an A in the course. I don't know, but obviously Facebook blossomed from there. The other one on there is the Airbnb. And so the Airbnb story, when they literally created the 11-star experience from one of their hosts way back then. Early on, they went out to New York to meet the hosts, because they were in San Francisco and all their hosts were out in New York, and they traveled out to, I think it was Brian Chesky. But anyway, a great podcast for anyone thinking about starting up a business. And then he asks, what mistakes should I avoid? And I go back to Gary Vaynerchuk. He's often said, he hasn't said it recently, but a couple of years ago, he often talked about, I want to set up an incubator at a nursing home where there are 90-year-olds in there, because in the retirement home, they're full of regrets. They didn't start. One thing their mistake was they didn't start their business. They didn't take those ideas. So avoiding not making the decision. I think just not having that regret. Go ahead, Ray. Start your business, buddy. because there's a lot of support for that. And I'm gonna highlight that next. There's not, if I look at my initial, I could have said, sorry, Ray, there's probably not much else I can do, or anyone who's, in that looking for a startup. But then I really thought, wait a minute, the Canadian and Quebec the accelerators across Canada. BC's huge, Alberta's huge. There's even in Saskatoon or Saskatchewan, Winnipeg. Toronto's full of them all the way, right, to, accelerators across Toronto, across Ontario, particularly because you've got the BlackBerry, RIM, Shopify. A lot of those early employees are now quite rich, but they're also starting up startups and accelerators across Canada. I highlighted a couple Canadian ones and a couple Quebec ones relevant to Rey Dufresne, but I've got a list. I have other lists. It's not my list, but it's just, things you can easily find. Startup Canada, Bonjour Startup in Montreal, CDL or Creative Destruction Lab in Montreal, and Centec, Montreal, another startup accelerator out of Montreal. For the past year or so, I've been following the Open People Network out of Toronto. Jeffrey Potvin and Laura Lorette are there to help entrepreneurs. And the first level is the 2-minute pitch, free for startups, a 2-minute E to E, entrepreneur to entrepreneurs, and the others kind of watch. But, in a couple weeks ago, they put 30 through in an hour, 30 startups, some cool ideas, really good ideas. Ray, if you got an idea, get out there and pitch it. 2 minutes, that's all it takes, because pitch your idea. Here in Calgary, Platform Calgary, Startup Calgary, they've got, I attended a very similar one, 1 minute, 2 minutes. I think they had 1 minute elevator. Just basically, what's your idea about? What problem are you trying to solve? These accelerators, it was great. It's fun to sit on those. And the startup team T in Edmonton, I didn't write that here, but they do the beer. They have all the beer sponsors, and Platform Calgary did the same, Annex Ale. But I mean, it's a great community, and they're there to help startups, and there's plenty of resources here in Calgary that I've had a couple on my podcast. But anyway, and then the Open People Network, he migrates to the 7-minute pitch. The more advanced startups get the 7-minute pitch. I think they pay a little bit of money for that, but by then they probably have some funding from friends, families, and whoever else. And that's a 7-minute pitch direct to VCs or venture capital companies. I did Clubhouse. I mean, if you want to start, invite experts to talk about, okay, move from business back to what he's doing today. He's working for a fraud expert at the bank or fraud exam, whatever it is at CIBC. Invite experts to talk about it. Ransomware, huge. Colonial Pipeline in the US recently. Email hacks, where they email you pretending you're the CFO or they're the CEO. They hack your email, and then the CFO sends 30, 40 grand to some stupid place. And then, and then hacking as a service, huge. The hackers pay, they get refunds. I've listened to, there's several, this isn't new, but hackers get refunds if the credit cards they get don't work. So that plays, just get people on talking about it. I'm sure there's people doing it, but you know what? Are they doing it in Montreal? Maybe they're not. I don't know. And then the last couple of things, because Ray's in this space. Recently, I just had these podcasts and the security podcast. I call it security or fraud, whatever you want to call it. But Strictly VC, their podcast is called Download. And 5th of June, it was called episode number 60 with Christopher Alberg on ransomware. And again, that's that Colonial Pipeline, the ransomware. He goes, so she asked the question to him. It's Connie Loizos from Strictly VC. And she says, so do you just, when there's a fraud or something happens or ransomware, do you just get the keys to the company you get in? He goes, no. So this is Christopher Alberg. He says, no, we don't want to get inside the company. We want to know what's going around the company, outside the company, and look at the environment that would create where the ransomware, where the weak points are. And so it's a really cool podcast to look at it from that lens. And that guy, he lives and breathes. I think he works for the Department of Defense in the US as well. They have contracts for them. So really good podcast. And then the Gray Matter podcast, just this week. And I was looking at it from the machine learning side. But Joshua Bratman from Abnormal Security, he talked about email and the same thing, how they learn it, they adopt their algorithms, because the email, they get more sophisticated. This social engineering around how they can hack. That one I mentioned earlier about the CFO getting a message from the CEO. He says they just they work with security companies to try to understand where the fraud might come up and predict it and anticipate. It's really cool. Another cool way to look at it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and go back. I'm just going to go back to my, okay. I want to, continuously, I want to conclude. Back to Caroline Laycock. As I noted above, she's clearly taken initiative to learn and apply her skills to other areas of employment. She may or may not be comfortable creating a Clubhouse chat room or starting a podcast. And she may or may not be comfortable with reaching out to potential partners, education partners or tech partners for her current employer, Lit First Aid. That's okay. The ideas remain for others to adopt and apply to their situation. But Caroline, she's already done more than a lot of people will do. At her age, my age, learning something new isn't easy. Caroline, hats off to you and kudos again. And congratulations for pivoting out of a 24-year-old at the City of Surrey. Transitioning into a startup role. Rey Dufresne may or may not have taken action on one or more of his ideas. They're not my ideas; those are his ideas. Because he said that. I had no contact with him after I submitted that to the LinkedIn Career Advice portal. Nothing. He never responded. However, there are likely many Rey Dufresnes across Canada with similar ambitions to start their own company. In fact, I've said this before. Out of my 313 podcasts since September 2019, more than half of my guests have pivoted, mostly from oil and gas, but they've pivoted into their own startup. But they did it on weekends or nights. True Booch Kombucha. He was talking about it. We were making just making it because he had a stomach problem, and really just Conrad Farrell. So Conrad was like, he's like, I just had a stomach. I just wanted to, for my own stomach gut, my own gut health. And he was making in his basement and working full time at KPMG. And then, took off. Friends and family and people started liking it. So they're everywhere. Tribuch Kombucha. So that is how that's how I came across the various startup accelerators and advisory services across Canada. That my awareness has just grown, and I just see it every day. So people if you have an idea, go for it. Go for it, man. So if you're stuck, in conclusion, if you're stuck, feel free to reach out. As I highlight on my website, solemnity.io, I seek to shine ideas on your light. Have a great day and stay safe.